Welcome back. It's another rainy day outside. I'm going to try and get a couple things done tonight on the car. I've been wrestling and messing with the fuel system and trying to get it working. Last I left off, I was having trouble with getting the regulator. This was the eBay $40 regulator that I had purchased. I'm running one of these on my car, but I don't have an issue again because I'm running high fuel pressure. And the fuel injection, or EFI, likes pressure. It doesn't necessarily need volume, it needs pressure. So, and also this, I couldn't get it low enough pressure to begin with. I mean, it's supposed to be rated 0 to 100 PSI, but it's a $40 regulator. And I saw some people that were reviewing the thing afterwards, after the fact, and they said they couldn't get it below 24 PSI. For a carb, you want to run it between like 5 and 8 PSI or something like that. So I looked, I did some research, and since this kit was $40 and already came with the -6 AN fittings, and it had the straight through on one side with the O-ring, so there's supposed to be an O-ring here. You reused the O-rings, but so it goes in, it's a straight thread O-ring, and on this side accepts the hose end. So I have found another regulator that I could just reuse all my fittings. So I got this Fuel Lab regulator. It is a 3.5 to 12 PSI, and it's great. It works perfect. I have it set, right now it's at 7 PSI. So feed, return, carb, vacuum source. I put my 0 to 15 gauge on it, and it's set to 15 PSI. Works great. This was the one I got, in case you want to reference any numbers. FUE 51504-1. So that sorted out the fuel. Now I need to work on getting the trans cooler hooked up and these old lines out. So these old lines are out. So I'm going to be running, I ordered a cooler. I've just got to figure out where I'm going to put it. So this is a derail. Is that a performance? It's pretty huge. There's my hand in size comparison. And this is a 650 CFM fan on here that goes either way depending how you wire this, which way it's positive and negative. And what's nice is this one is -6 fittings already on it. So I can just adapt this to whatever end I need to put on here, depending where I mount it, and kick cables or hose up to the trans. So I'm unsure if I'm going to mount this in the back down under on this side where the muffler cutout is. That's a good spot I can try and put it up in. Another thing I need to get done is the Chevy style high pressure power steering pump to the Ford low pressure rack. This thing makes a ton of pressure and needs a restrictor in line. So today I ordered a kit I found on eBay. It's a LSX swap generic kit. So it takes the truck accessory pump and mates it to the Ford rack. Has the restrictors, O-rings, all the fittings, and everything's good there. So that will fix that up. And then tonight I'm gonna try and get done probably this alternator plug, because this takes the special plug. So got a few things to do here. So let's get started. Okay, this is the plug that you need to go in the top of the truck alternator. It's a 4-pin, and there's this, yeah, it's a 4-pin, only 2 wires in use. Both get 12 volts. However, the brown wire is supposed to go to your idiot light in the dash, and if you're not using one, you have to wire this resistor in line to this brown one, and then they both go to 12 volts. So what I'm gonna do here, since I'm not running an idiot light, is cut this brown wire short, solder this in line, meet these two together at the end, and then go into one wire, which will jump over my battery post. So I'm gonna say we're gonna want to cut this. This has a long tail. I don't like to stress the tails on these, and I might even put like a toothpick or something in line with the shrink tubing, because these can break, and if this breaks, this is bad news. My car, this broke, and I had some backfeeding issues of power, and caused my ECU actually burned a couple traces inside that I had to fix. So this is pretty crucial that this is in good shape. I'm assuming it was that. I mean, well, that's the only thing, to my knowledge, it was an issue. So we're gonna leave a little bit more here on here as a tail, so this much here. So I'll probably cut this off about here. And we'll strip a good length of it. So strip about that much of it. And actually we'll strip it a little more. I think this is 16 gauge wire. Okay. Get this good and wrapped around here. Trying not to stress too much on that joint. Alright, now we're gonna solder that up. These here are the helping hands, as we call them, and very handy when it comes to holding everything while you solder. So we'll put those in here, put this one in like that, we'll get this one, make sure it's out of the way. I'm going to use the antique soldering iron, and I need some solder. We got any solder laying around? What's this stuff? Just 30 gauge. This is really thin. Oh, here we go. This will work. It's also very thin, but it'll work. Gotta get some heat into the wire. I need some thicker solder. This stuff is like nothing. I might be here all day. Okay, let me go find some real solder, because this is ridiculous. Some more sufficient sized solder has been found. So let's get this hot. Gotta get the base nice and hot. And then the solder will kind of wick into it. Kind of drag it along. Nice and hot. All right, there's one. What we want to do here is cut this one down so it's about 3/4 of the way down that resistor leg. I'll get it wrapped around, and then I can just take off one wire off of it to go over to the start, or to the positive post. So what we're going to do is cut this down to about here. And these are crappy. Let's go with some of these. Also crappy. Strip this, starting at about here. And then take this out, this, and make these straight. I think we're actually gonna strip this back a little further. Okay, we'll cut off the excess that we don't need. looks good. Join this up here. So this is going to sit in like this, come around. Yeah, we're going to have to splint this. That's about how it's going to sit in the car. Head that way. This just looks good. Normally I would yell and say, put your shrink tubing on first, but because of what we're going to do with this, I'm going to shrink tubing the whole piece. And we'll actually use a big piece to go over top of it. Make sure it's good and hot. Okay. Now, I'm going to find me some suitable gauge wire. In an attempt to make this lay flat, since there's so much going on, I did the weaving technique, where you split it into 3 and kind of make like a braid out of it. And the braids go opposite directions. Trying to get this good and hot. Make sure the braid is nice and filled here. Make sure it's hot, everything's flowing. Now I'm gonna run some big shrink tubing on there. Oh, let's see what's in the supply here. This one should do it. Alright, so we're gonna go about this distance. Get rid of the snip. So we're gonna have this piece here, and then we're gonna neck it down to the next smaller size, which would be this stuff. And we'll determine this size once we know how long it is in the car. Heat gun acquired. Rotate, rotate, rotate. Alright, now we find out how long it needs to be, and we'll put the rest on, put an end on it. Get some stuff out of the way. Here's the length we're going to end up going with. And don't forget shrink tubing here. Reload the crimpers. Okay. Get this in here. This is an eye that will fit on the post that I put in. The screw, there's a screw down section. Crimp. And then what I'm actually going to do here is put this larger piece on. So I'm going to scrunch this back out of the way, pull this back, put this piece on here like so with the heat gun. This is a little bigger than the other stuff. Okay, so that end looks nice. I'm going to take this and we'll pull it back in place over what we just put on. Slip it up so it looks like that. Butt it right up in there. And then what we're gonna do is actually start from this end so it clamps down here. And then assuming this isn't scorching hot, start working my way down. This will work all the wrinkles out. And there you go. Complete. That finishes up that. Picks up here, comes down, sits down in here, comes up, and just goes right into the screw post. There's a screw head that fits perfectly right here. So once all this is where it needs to be, I can zip it all together. So I still need to get an alternator power wire on here. I don't know if I can get away with 10 gauge or not. I'm going to check. I want to see how much comes off of this guy, if I need to run something big and beefy or not. So I gotta get that done and a few other things. Tonight is transmission night. We're focusing on trying to get some of this stuff done. So far I already went ahead and did the nasty task of pulling the old pan out and getting trans fluid absolutely everywhere. I went ahead and cleaned up the gasket. I scrubbed this out really good and brake cleaned it really well. So I'm gonna have to blow it out yet. Also pulled out the magnet, cleaned the magnet off really well. So now what we're gonna do is try and get the gasket on it, and I also gotta pull the filter out because I have another filter over here that we're gonna throw in. Okay, so in an effort to get this to stay put, I think we're just gonna try and run some bolts. By the way, clean your hardware. I don't know, I take an oddly satisfying, it's oddly satisfying to clean hardware. I don't know why I like doing it, but I like taking the dirty, grimy stuff and cleaning it up. So here we're gonna stick, should be able to start these or thread them, or push them through carefully. And go around here. And this should help hold everything in place while we try and lay on the back and get up in there. We'll see if this works or screws me in the end here. This might not work very well. We'll see. You can also, I guess, take some ultra copper and dab it around and let it set up, and then use that as like a tacky glue. Well, we'll try the bolt method first. If it don't work, oh well. We can use some ultra copper. So I'll go around and get the rest of these done. I still have to crawl under the car and get the rest of the filter pulled down, and that is this guy. So there is a, oh, I thought that was open right there. There is a grommet. This goes in right here. And then there's a stud or a bolt that goes in with a sleeve under it that holds it. Which way is it in the car? I forget, but holds it either way here up in. So we'll get that one old one out and the new one wrestled in. Here's what we're looking at. This is the Turbo 400 with the pan pulled off. And I've already cleaned up most of the mess. This is a very dirty job. So the gasket material, the old gasket material, needs to come off of this mating surface. So you can see the previous person had done this recently, but they didn't clean this stuff up. They just gooped a bunch of RTV or ultra copper in here, and it was still leaking. And it's probably because around all these bolt holes there's still old gasket material. So you'll have to use a razor blade. I'm going to use a razor blade. I also have a I use one of these. It's like a cloth bristled brush. I forget where we got these, like Harbor Freight or something, but it's like a cloth that I use up in here like this, and just run at a very low speed just to help kind of, this with some brake clean will knock all of this stuff off relatively easy. What a razor can't get. So now I'm just going to lay under here for a while and get this perfectly spotless clean so we have a good sealing surface. And continuing with getting the transmission stuff completed, I've kind of got an idea where to mount this giant transcooler. And this thing, it's huge. It's big. So what I think I'm going to do is use the nutsert tool here and build some tabs that come off of here with studs that stick out that'll be threaded, that I can then slip this over. So what I'm talking about here is that'll mount somewhere in this range vicinity here, and these holes here will slip over some studs that are bolted to the radiator. And then this should give me access to get to the AN fittings on the bottom, as well as help with cool the radiator as well, because that's a 650 CFM fan on top of the F-body fans. So I'm going to make up some straps with studs on them and get those nutserted and mounted on there, and make some studs and weld on them and paint everything, and it should look pretty good and work pretty darn well. Here's how I'm going about making the tabs that are going to hold this on. I cut a bunch of, this stuff's pretty thick, it's like 1/8 inch, is it 1/8 inch? Yeah, 1/8 inch steel plate down into 1 inch wide by 2 1/4 inches long. This is for, I'm going to be using a bunch of 1/4-20 hardware. So I made 4 of these, put them up in the drill press, drilled a hole so they're all the same. And what's going to happen is I'm going to nutsert this side, so this will go in, and then I'm going to weld a bolt, 1/4-20 bolt, to the other side that'll pass through that hole right there. So what I'm going to do is take one of these bolts and place it here so the center is about in the plus, Weld that on there like that, make a tab, and then I'm gonna drill out, I have a bunch of these rubber feet. I'm gonna drill out 4 of these rubber feet so that the center will fit down over here, over this bolt, and then that'll make a little rubber isolated standoff. So I'll get to welding. I really need to invest in a pair of MIG pliers. Okay, got it lined up where I want. That should do. Yep. I might throw a 4th on there just for good measure. That'll work. I'll do the rest. Give these a quick coat of paint. Woo! Skating around. Inserts in. Groove nuts in. Just got done making the AN lines, -6 lines that are going to be used for the cooler. So I still have to crawl under and get the other fittings out with the barbs. Put these in. These are TH400-6 adapters. They're going to go in. And then out of the trans, I'm going to use these 45s. So made up these hoses. Got the trans cooler mounted with some nut certs drilled into the radiator and some standoffs so that it's, and rubber isolators, if you can see them. So that should keep all vibration down. Measured it just right. Did have to do just a hair of trimming. I used the square file on that inner section of piece of fiberglass on the nose here, but everything fits. Should still get some air through on this side. So I gotta rehook all my lines back up, but I might need to kick this forward yet to be able to get access to the bottom AN fittings of the trans cooler here and make sure they're tight. So gonna get those in, and then the line's going back. And then today I might also yet, depending how much time I get, I'll fix and put the right fuel fittings in right here on the fuel lines because I'd used the wrong ones. So I have to take these down and undo these and put the nut sleeve and tube nut on here and reflare with an inverted 37-degree flare because these have the wrong ones. So I get those done and I can mount this fender back on for good. Fuel will be done. The MSD I'm going to try and also get mounted. We'll see if I get to that today or not. I'm just going to riv nut or nut cert the little quarter 20 ones in, or M4 or whatever I can get to fit. And then we're getting real close. So I'll get some lines on and the transcooler hooked up. Back to this familiar looking sight with the fender yanked off. But I got a lot done today. The transcooler, as you saw in the previous clip, is on, isolated with rubber isolators. I made -6 AN nylon hose that runs back into the -6 45-degree hose end and into the -6 to TH400 with a rubber grommet or O-ring that seals it up. Everything there worked great. So I just kicked the AN lines out around here in a nice lazy loop and used the patented, true and tested zip ties in the figure 8 as spacers like you do on spark plug wires, and into these rubber clamps. And then it comes back, it's all nice, and then it kicks right up over the cross member mount. So that's all solid, nothing moves. So that's all done and taken care of. The fuel lines I took care of while I was over here, and got the crush olive fittings off, and then the tube sleeves and tube nuts into union fittings to go into the hose ends. So this is the feeds a 5/16, which I might run into issues with, we'll find out. 5/16 tube sleeve, tube nut, and then a -5 to a -6 adapter to a -6 hose end for the AN, and then more of these figure 8 separator loops. So that's all taken care of. Everything under the car is taken care of. Other things that were taken care of, put in a clamp right here just to hold the overflow puke thing, and I left the little crook on it, so if it's going to puke straight forward. Got the radiator put back in, all the hoses back on it. Got some of this wiring over here taken care of that was in the way. Trying to figure out, this should be manifold or port vacuum above the throttle blade, and this one should be manifold vacuum, but this is going to my map sensor, so I want to reroute that and under the intake and make it look better. And then I'm going to need a vacuum source for the fuel pressure regulator. All that's looking good. I plugged in the fuel pressure regulator, or the fuel pump, and gave it some pressure. We have no leaks. Made the alternator, both alternator wires are now on and made. Came out nice. Got the source, vacuum source into the tree taken care of. This did have one of these Barb 90s on it for the brake booster, but since it's a Fox, it already has the tree on it with it. So I need to power all these other things with manifold vacuum. So this is acting as the source for all this. This is broken, I need to put over here. That's for the controls the doors inside, the heater or blower vent doors. So I got to take care of that. I still have to mount the MSD box, and I still need to do the power steering lines, but they're in the mailbox. I got to go get them. And the brake lines, so there's not much left. I need to do linkage, all the linkages. So I need throttle linkage. I need to get this old one out, put the new throttle cable in, and get it measured and correct. The shifter linkage needs done. I did the pan, gasket, filter last night, cleaned out all that. So and then it needs fluid. So we're getting close. And I'll probably throw everything I have together so far together and get that posted. Till then, have a good one.